Hello, all listeners of the Ukrainian Roots Radio Наш Голос. I'm your host, Anton Lysenko. Today, we'll be discussing the security assistance deal what Canada recently signed with Ukraine. And leading us through this topic will be Oleksandr Kraiev. He is an expert in the U.S. foreign policy, director of the North American program in the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism. So, hello, Oleksandr, and welcome to the studio of the radio Наш Голос.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau signed the security assistance deal with Ukraine on the second anniversary of the Russian full-scale invasion. Mr. Oleksandr, how much does this agreement mean for Ukraine and, of course, for Canada?
So definitely a big step in our bilateral relations. And also, this is a big milestone, basically, for Ukrainian security guarantees and security relations with the West. According to our national security strategy, this agreement is a part of our wider cooperation with Western allies, and it's one of the first several agreements, others including the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, France, Germany, Denmark, and Italy as well. So basically, now we're talking that Ukraine is creating some kind of a system of alliances in order to enforce our military industrial complex, in order to provide for more security, more additional help in munitions, in technical staff, in all kinds of necessities for Ukrainian defenders. And of course, this agreement is also a stepping stone for future Ukrainian membership in NATO, because each one of those agreements also constitutes a specific article that states that this particular country supports Ukrainian membership in NATO and will do everything possible in order to foster and provide for further integration of Ukraine into North Atlantic Treaty. So this agreement is very important for Ukraine, although it is not security guarantees per se, as it is sometimes referred to in Ukrainian media sphere, but nonetheless, it is very important for Ukraine to conduct such negotiations and sign such agreements with our partners and allies.
Canada is the first non-European country and, of course, first country in North America who signed a deal, the security assistance deal with Ukraine. Does it mean that Canada, during the political crisis in the United States, take leadership in this part of the world regarding to Ukrainian support?
Yeah, so definitely you can say so, because it is commonly referred that the Canadian foreign policy, especially when it comes to security and hard security, that Canadian foreign policy comes in footsteps of the American position, of American worldview and American interest. But now we see that despite United States' failure to lead the West, despite the constitutional crisis taking place in the House of Representatives, Canada has its own initiative and has its own readiness and willingness to take an active role in both NATO and global security as well. That can be welcomed. That's a very good development for international arena, for international security, and definitely that's a good example for American politicians, because the Canadians are now in charge of the security issues in North America. That's definitely something to think about in the House.
I want to make it really clear for our listeners that Canada called this agreement the security assistance deal, and Ukraine communicate this agreement as a security guarantee deal. So why do we have two different names for one document?
Unfortunately, that's the problem with Ukrainian political and informational sphere, to be honest, because we would like to present these deals, we would like to view these agreements as a definite security guarantees, and we're definitely striving for such guarantees. Although those of us who work within the foreign relations sphere, those of us engaged in foreign policy and international security, we do understand that there is no such word as guarantee in any of those treaties. And so basically we cannot call them security guarantees. That was one of the main issues with the Vilnius NATO summit, by the way. The final documents and the final communique of Vilnius Security Summit was only approved after all the mentions of guarantees, even as a word guarantees, was excluded from the final documents. So basically, it is more of our appreciation of the treaty rather than the essential part of the treaty. And the Canadian view of the deal, that it's mostly a security package, security assistance or security deal with Ukraine, not the guarantees of security for Ukraine, is much more realistic than the Ukrainian media image of this deal. At the same time, if we speak about Ukrainian politicians, if we speak about Ukrainian expert community, there is a much more realistic approach to the issue. We do understand that this treaty does not provide for any concrete guarantees for Ukraine. But, as I have said earlier, this is a stepping stone for our NATO membership. And NATO membership for us being the final guarantee of Ukrainian security and Ukrainian territorial integrity and Ukrainian independence. Because everything apart from NATO will not suffice to withstand future Russian aggressive moves and to withstand any possible continuation of Russian war against Ukraine. So to sum up, it is not security guarantees if we speak about this particular deal, but it is a stepping stone, it is a starting point for future guarantees that will be provided for Ukraine within NATO.
Canada is going to donate more than $3 billion for Ukraine this year. But what's going to happen in 2025, 2026 years?
That's a strategic part of these deals, because apart from providing aid here and now for Ukrainian armed forces and for Ukrainian economy, these deals also provide for long-term investments, both resource investments, financial investment, and technological investment. Because the main point of these agreements is to help Ukraine to restructure and basically resurrect its industrial military complex. These deals are opting to provide Ukraine the possibility to create its own weapons and to create its own capabilities in order to resupply and rearm Ukrainian army. So as of now, Canada, as well as all the other allies of Ukraine, are providing much needed support, weapons, munition, money, everything necessary. But the strategic view is that Ukraine should be able to create all the necessary weaponry and all the necessary munition by itself. Of course, with some resource support from the allies, but the main issue is that allies want to invest into Ukraine as much as possible in order to make Ukraine self-sufficient in security regard.
Since the beginning of the war, Canada has been providing military assistance to Ukraine, political assistance. Canada sent to Ukraine a huge number of military equipment and ammunition, but not everything going so smoothly as we want to. For example, Canadian opposition used the Ukrainian topics to criticize Justin Trudeau's government. Canada has 80,000 rockets. Canadian government still consider to donate these rockets for Ukraine, because Canadian opposition push Canadian government do it faster, but final decision is not there yet. Mr. Oleksandr, I would like to know your opinion. What is the reason of this conflict?
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely this year is very intense in political terms. We speak not only about the specific problematic of Ukraine and the Ukrainian struggle against Russian aggression. We should take into consideration that this year is a year of election. We have more than 70 elections in different countries, in different democracies all around the world. The main, of course, being the United States election. And if we speak about Canada, of course, the political process are also very hot and very on topic with everything. And for all the democracies, Ukraine is one of the, let's call it a marker. This is a marker of foreign politics and security politics for all the candidates. It's a marker of international relations for all the political parties. And basically, Ukraine cannot be excluded from political debates. Ukrainian topic is one of the hottest one and one of the most crucial, especially for the Western democracies. And that is why in many cases we do see that Ukrainian topic is manipulated or in some other cases used as a political tool to gain some votes or to attack the other party. So I don't want to take any sides when we speak about the internal debates and political strifes in Canada, but basically the whole idea of Ukraine being a part of the political debate in Western democracies is very understandable because Ukraine became a narrative. Ukraine is not a problem in itself. Ukraine is not a problem of solely Ukraine. Russian aggression against Ukraine is a systemic problem for international security and even for international law. And that is why all the issues concerning Ukraine, concerning providing aid for Ukraine, providing funds for Ukraine, and the general position of any politician on Ukrainian issues, on the issues of Russian aggression and Russian accountability is very much a hot fuss for everybody in Western politics right now.
Also, I want to remind our listeners that recently our studio joined Ukrainian military expert Pavlo Narozhny, and he explained why Ukrainian army need this rocket, Canadian rocket CRV-7, and how Ukrainian army going to use it. So make sure you watch this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel of the radio Наш Голос. And now we continue with Oleksandr Kraiev. I would like to know your opinion, Mr. Oleksandr. How dangerous is the conflict between Canadian opposition and the government? Because we see the same situation in the United States. So how expensive could such a conflict be for Ukraine?
There's definitely a worrisome development because we do understand that the continuity and the systemic nature of support for Ukraine is crucial for Ukrainian defenders, for Ukrainian armed forces, because we should be able to plan our defense as well as our offense. And we cannot make any strategic or even tactical planning without a definite understanding when, in which packages and within which terms will all the support be provided for Ukraine. So definitely it's not an issue of political debates for Ukraine. It's an issue of survival of Ukrainian defenders and of Ukraine as a nation. So any such debate is worrisome for Ukrainians. But at the same time, that's the nature of democracy. Any hot topic became debatable, discussionable, and a very politicized issue, if you ask me. So definitely the only thing that Ukraine should do in this regard is to provide Canadian government, provide Canadian political parties and anybody interested with proved and on-hand information. So basically our diplomats, our diplomatic corps in other countries should play a neutral role in any kind of internal political debates and only be a provider of Ukrainian position and Ukrainian information. And that's the only case where Ukraine can be a valuable partner for any political player in the West. When Ukraine can be a trustworthy partner, the main strategy is not to take side and let the democracy decide itself. Let the democratic processes flow. That's the main issue for us, because our defense against Russia is basically the fight for our democratic rights, for our rights of self-determination, for our Ukrainian democracy. And that is why we should not impair the democracies and the democratic processes of our partners. Of course, as you rightfully mentioned, it is dangerous for us that Ukrainian topic is so much politicized and became basically a victim of political debates. But there is nothing directly that we can do apart from being a trustworthy and active partner on the state level.
Thank you for your answer. And there is one more question what I would like to ask you. Canada is a democratic country, and it's very important to preserve the same level of the support of Ukraine among Canadian society, because Canadian society influence the government. And we know that in some other country, the level of support among the citizen is decreasing. So, Mr. Oleksandr, how do you rate the level of support among Canadian citizens?
Yeah, definitely the level of support, even in the most pro-Ukrainian countries, is decreasing. Well, just because it's a natural process. Ukrainian topic is has been on the headlines for quite a long time, and as a journalist, you may understand that no news piece can be a valid news piece for such a long time. No information can be interesting for the viewers for such a long time. And that is why Ukraine, for example, was overshadowed by the Gaza conflict. Ukraine was overshadowed by the Houthis aggression in the Red Sea. Ukraine was overshadowed by the election news in all the democracies. So that is the problem. And basically, the main approach for Ukraine in this regard is once again to be an active provider of information, both on state level and of course on the people-to-people diplomacy level. And that's where Ukrainian diaspora come in hand very, very much. That's where Ukrainian media, both Ukrainian-based and foreign-based media, comes in hand. That's where international experts and international journalists come in hand. So the main idea for Ukraine in this regard, in the regard of decreasing interest, I will not say decreasing support, but rather decreasing interests in Ukraine. The main issue for us is to stay relatable, is to stay on topic, is to stay on the agenda, and to present a wider context that, as I said before, it is not only about Ukraine defending Ukraine. It is about the systemic changes in international security. It is about the systemic changes in international law and international relations themselves. It is about that with the defeat of Ukraine, the world will change dramatically, and the dictatorships may win. And that is why Ukraine still should be on the agenda, not only for politicians, but also for ordinary voters, for ordinary people who are to decide the future of their countries, because it is a democracy. It is the ordinary voters who decide the future of a democratic state.
Thank you, Oleksandr. And the last question I want to ask you is what else Canada could do for Ukraine in deterring the Russian armed aggression?
Well, Canada has already done a lot for Ukraine, both politically, being one of our main proponents and fostering Ukrainian membership in NATO, fostering support from other NATO and even European allies. So Canada has helped a lot in political sphere. Canada has also helped a lot in military spectrum, if we say so, with the provision of a lot of munitions, a lot of vehicles and everything. Canada was very, very much helpful for Ukraine. But also, one of the key aspects of Canadian help that should and could be increased is, of course, the humanitarian role of Canada. We do know that Canada is one of the humanitarian leaders of Western world. Canada projects itself as a humanitarian giant in international relations. And as of now, a lot of efforts is being done in Ukraine for Ukrainian reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukrainian economy, infrastructure, on demining activities for Ukrainian fields and for Ukrainian cities, on reconstruction of Ukrainian cities, of Ukrainian communities, etc., etc., etc. And a lot is done within the framework of the so-called Lugano Declaration, which presented the plan of reconstruction of Ukraine. I do believe that Canada can play a much bigger role within the reconstruction processes in Ukraine, and I do believe it will be profitable not only for Ukraine as a recipient of this help, but also for Canadian investors, because a lot of businesses in Ukraine are still very much active. They're still providing a lot of goods and services for the population, both in Ukraine and outside. So it's not only about giving money because you are so kind. It is about investing in Ukraine and then reaping the benefits from your investments. So apart from political and military aid, I do believe that Canada can do much, much more when it comes to investment climate in Ukraine and to reconstruction of Ukrainian economy.
Thank you, Oleksandr, for conversation. So, Oleksandr Kraiev, expert in U.S. and foreign policy, director of the North American program of the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism. He was here with us today in our studio. Thank you, Oleksandr, again.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.